G'day guys, Clint here, recording episode number 67 of The Full Landscape. I have a good friend of mine here, Mr. Anthony Scaffidi, who has described himself as the business development manager, but I think he's more managing director with a business development skill of elite pools and landscapes. In addition to that, plunge pools, which we'll talk about in this podcast. Anthony and I have known each other for a long time, and I've been at him to do a podcast. I think having a swimming pool builder on the podcast that also has a lot to do with the landscape industry would be beneficial for our listeners. In this podcast, we talk about his relationship with his father in the business, and obviously his desire to be an architect, and then kind of scratching that itch by moving into landscaping and pool building. So hopefully there's some value in here for you. If you've got any questions about this podcast or any other podcast, don't hesitate to hit me up. And if you want to get in touch with Anthony, he's very active on Instagram, and his website will have all the information about what they do. That'll be linked up below, but I'll leave it with you. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Well, thank you very much for coming in. I know it was not a hard decision when I said, do you want to do legs or do you want to go do a podcast? And you're like, well, we've just come off the back of a public holiday, so do a podcast. So for those that tune in, obviously the podcast is for the landscapers and the landscape industry, but a lot of people listen. If you want to give us a brief introduction into how you became a concreter.
Well,
no, tell us about how, I guess, the journey from... school into becoming, now what, are you managing director of Elite Pools?
Yeah.
So, this is Anthony Scaffidi for everyone. Yeah, sorry, I should have did that at the start.
Yeah, so I very much tried not to be in construction for a long time, and did retail, did hospitality, worked in a bank, did night shift, did all sorts of things to try and avoid the construction industry. All my mates said I was mad because I had a family business that I could walk into. We all know that's not that easy, but so I went. I've got a lot of life experience doing other things and developing me as a person, until such time when my father approached me the better part of 12 years ago, a little more than 12 years ago now, to go full time into the business after doing odds and ends, doing automation and some more techie things for them, as that was starting to develop in the industry with different controllers for pools and home automation, etc. And that was a bit of my background that I'd started developing in the electronics world between computers and TVs and gaming, and which was what we were involved with previously. And from there I jumped in a sales role, and I think 12 years on, I think I made the right decision, and I'm here today.
So those other jobs, what was the idea? Like, it wasn't your dad and your mum saying, go out and earn your stripes. Obviously, if you look at the Coopers family, I think they have, if you want to go work for Coopers, you have to go get a degree and work somewhere else first. And there's obviously these kind of, you're second generation, but there's these kind of legacy family businesses that want their...
Third generation.
So third generation. So then it's Seb's fourth?
Seb
Probably
will be
not.
fourth. I hope not.
Yeah. That's very misogynistic, and also has there's two children that could take over.
Sienna will.
Yeah, she'll be the boss.
Yeah.
So... What, did they not want you to... Was it the advice of your parents, or was it more the advice of just your mates going... Or who was saying not to get into construction?
I think what it was growing up is I used to go work with Dad in school holidays. So there was nothing I wanted to do less than do that. I wanted to sit at home and play PlayStation. Instead, I was carrying buckets and washing down Tremendi and having a clean up slurry and getting...
We're going to need a translator for this.
Yeah. Got bitten on the ass by puppies and all sorts of stuff that happened when you were younger. And I remember Dad being gone very early in the morning and crashing out on the couch when he got home, So, and you see him working very hard, like come home really dirty, like covered in cement dust and all that sort of stuff. And you think to yourself, it's probably not the life for me. And I was very much into computers and design, funnily enough. I really wanted to be an architect, and I didn't put it in the yards in school. So I went and did network engineering instead.
So did you finish high school? The plan was to go to uni? Yep. And at what point in high school are you going, okay, we're not going to uni now? You finished?
About halfway through year 12.
Yeah.
When I kind of decided I wasn't really that keen on it. I went and did year 12 based on, a bit of expectation in the family. Yeah. But my heart wasn't in it, so I didn't put in the effort, and I got what I deserved.
You just mail it in, you get a basic TER, and
correct.
It's not going to get you into the courses that you wanted to.
100%.
I guess sliding doors, like you're never really going to know what would have happened. But if you had gone to uni, like ideal situation, you would have gone into architecture.
Yeah, correct.
Yep.
Yeah, that definitely would have been the path I took.
Yep.
I've got a very keen interest in it. It's probably the reason we're doing what we're doing is my passion for design and architectural projects. There's the most beautiful things getting built in Australia are done by architects, and I want to be part of that.
So you now, I guess, if you can give us the elevator pitch for what Elite Pools does. Obviously, it's a landscaping podcast, but your business is quite diverse.
Yep.
Talk to me about what Elite Pools does. What's the, when you meet someone at a party, what do you tell them that you do?
I think it comes down to I say I do either one of two things. I either say I build swimming pools or I'm in outdoor construction.
Yep.
And outdoor construction then moves into a very vast array of what a landscaper does these days.
Yep.
And whether it is build pools or retaining walls or putting up a fence or doing a concrete slab or building a bench or putting in a plant or doing garden lighting, landscaping is such a diverse world these days. It's not putting in garden edging, laying some lawn and some irrigation. It's so much more than that.
And that, obviously, the pools was the traditional business.
Yep.
So under your dad and your mum,
Yep.
that was just pools?
Yep.
And then at some point you decided that you wanted to do more?
Yeah, so, I mean, as a salesperson, when I moved into the business, I didn't know how to say no, especially if it meant money. Anyone that knows me would attest to that. So what would happen is we'd be on site and it'd be like, oh, you've put the pool in, we need to put the paving around it. Could you maybe pour the concrete? Now can you do the paving while you're doing the coping? Oh, could you put the fence in? Oh, could you build me an equipment room? So we've been landscaping in one form or another for a better part of since I've started 12 years ago.
Yep.
Maybe longer.
And in varying levels?
Yeah, correct. So it was more of an ad hoc scenario. There wasn't the detail of here's a plan. I'm going to build you this and this is a price. It was much more of a golden era where you could tell a client, I'll do this for you, put a bill in, they'd pay for it.
Yep.
And never ask for a number.
Yep.
That definitely changed as the jobs got bigger, and we had to develop into offering it earlier in the piece. 6 years ago, we went from Elite Pool Constructions to Elite Pools Design and Construct.
Yep.
With a bit of an effort and emphasis on offering a design along with the construction of the pool. And that really evolved quickly into referring to the name as Elite Pools and Landscape instead, because landscape encapsulated more about what we were trying to do. It wasn't just to build a pool and design it. It was design the pool, design what was going around it, and have an influence on what was happening on the greater site.
So you went, at some point, there was landscaping, but then I guess from recent memory, you actually had a landscaping crew. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the process of going from what that was and then explain what you're doing now. Yep. And if you can detail why, I guess, what happened, I guess the stages of what happened. Yeah. I think it might be beneficial for the listeners to understand. Yep. I talked to a lot of landscapers and there's always challenges around profitability and staff and training and employing and finding staff and that kind of thing. Talk to me about, I guess, your learnings along that process from just building pools to then contract landscaping to then employee landscaping back to contract landscaping.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we started the landscaping part of the business and really putting an emphasis on it, we did start off by subcontracting it out, and as someone that's always had employees, it became very hard to then go, okay, this is a subcontracted model, and now we're at their whim of when they're available. Yep. So we did decide to bring in a landscaping team. That was over a 2-year period. That comes with its own cons, where you need to have a certain amount of work that is probably more than you can actually do to ensure that you've always got someone working. And if they're not laying, installing, or digging, or doing that construction side of it, their reliability and wet days and long times for decisions from clients and projects not being ready, you can lose months of or weeks of time, which just eats into your profitability, and to the point where the idea of going back to a subcontracted model made more sense. We're not doing 20, 30 landscapes a year, it's 5 or 6. And so to deliver them the way we want to and the quality we want to, it works out much better subcontracting it.
Yeah, I guess if you had them as full-time employees and you had to make the profit that you require, you become too expensive, right?
Correct.
Because then you have to charge for those downtimes and the non-workings and the delays and all that. And then at that point, you become anti-competitive in the market.
Yeah, correct.
So now you're contract landscaping with owner builder. Well, you're building your own pools. What is a design like? What's that design process look like? Like, do you have internal design? Are you doing the design? Yep. And are you doing the pool design and the landscape design?
Yep. So at the moment, I have 2 full-time designers, both with varying degrees of background. Both have worked overseas, one out of South America and Europe and the other one out of England and Australia. So I've got a really diverse mix of what we can offer. I don't think we have a brand as far as an identity of what we design.
As in a style?
A style,
like a lot
correct.
of you can look at a design and you can see that a landscape designer, that's...
Yeah. We try not to have the approach of one cut fits all. And you do replicate and you do borrow ideas from other people.
Because a client will see something and go, I really like what you did in Joslin. Can you do similar?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But you try not to repeat it. I mean, at the end of the day, the primary business is putting pools in. And then more than often than not, they're a rectangle. So we often joke we build rectangles for a living. We've got to make things pretty around them to make it interesting.
Which is funny because a lot of landscapers, we talk about it with the awards, like the pool kind of is such a feature. It's a massive water feature. So you're looking at the opposite. Like you're like, we build rectangles, we want to make it pretty, but then the landscapers are like, well, this is the most expensive water feature in South Australia.
Yeah.
And we're just landscaping around it. Not to take anything away from either sides of those.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, I think that both things are critical together. Yeah. And whether we're doing the landscape or it's someone else, it's important that what is delivered is A, in the best interest of the client, but B is what's the word? Is adding value. Yep. It's adding value to what we're building. It's not just throw down some artificial turf and some mod wood and slap a coping down and I'm done.
Yep.
It's having a bit of thought about what's being executed and that will add value to the property and value to the industry. And as we do that, that should increase the demand on high-end landscape, as well as then the range of what we've got to pick from a clientele base.
Because traditionally a pool, not necessarily a pool builder, but a pool installer, you might get coping, right? Like they might drop in a pool and they'll cope it.
Yeah.
And that's the contract done.
Correct. Yeah. Nothing past the silicon joint.
And not a lot of correspondence or value adds given to that because it's not really what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is funny because they probably make more money because they're just like pool, coping, out.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You do enough of that. You just kind of like...
Yeah. 4 site visits and you're done.
Yeah, that's it. So with that design in mind, I'm interested to kind of explore the relationship with landscapers and the relationship with clients. So you'll build pools for the client and you'll build pools for landscapers?
Yep.
And then, so your client could be the pool, your client could be the landscaper and your client could be the client?
Yep.
And so there's this triangle.
Or the builder.
Yeah. And so what are things that you wish those parties did better or communicated more or didn't, or what are things that maybe they don't understand about pool building that would benefit them? I guess access to sites or that kind of thing.
I think what would benefit a lot of the industry as a whole, whether it's just pools or landscape, is the idea that we can be involved earlier in the architectural project than sometimes we get to be.
Yep.
Where traditionally the home's gone to council, it's been approved, and we've been tacked on at the end.
Why do you think that is?
That is, I feel like, because the budget for what happens outside the home is often the ancillary rather than the primary. Even though the first thing you see is someone's front yard.
Yeah.
The first thing you see, 99% of the world is going to see their front yard. It's the most important part of the house. So the facade, the front fence, and the landscaping in the front is the most important part. And often the last two being the fence and the landscaping.
Well, look what's happening. My house. The front yard was the last thing.
Because it's not the usable point for you. You don't care.
Yeah.
Not that you don't care, but it's not the top of the pot. It's
inconsequential to me. I genuinely don't care.
Yeah.
But
the thing is when if you go to sell that house, the first ad that goes up is the first photo up is the pool. The second one is what does the front look like. And a well landscaped and designed front yard and a well positioned pool is going to add value.
Do you think that there's builders in South Australia that are doing that now better than ever before?
I think it's improving. There's definitely a lot more call for doing consulting work early in the piece, but it feels like you're still second. Like, it's always the...
As in the landscaper and the pool builder are second to the construction.
Well, it might be that the pool's second and the landscape's even third.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a shame. And
which leaves things like irrigation and garden lighting as an absolute last thought.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and garden lighting being the number one thing that is put cables in.
Yeah.
And we'll deal with this later on.
Yeah.
And then
But it can also be the first thing they chop out when they're trying to save money.
Yeah, correct. Correct. Yeah, 100%. So... that's what I feel like is suffering. There's not as much emphasis, and people feel like how I'm living inside my home is the most important part, which makes sense.
But the backyard, probably more than the front yard, now has become part of the house, right? Correct. Like, that's what I'm seeing, and that's how we've tried to build our backyard. That we kind of step into the living area is the outside and the inside connected. Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I guess for the ones that you follow, like you follow these builders on Instagram and the pool builders and the landscapers, and you're kind of seeing there's a lot. It seems like there's a lot of acknowledgement and sharing when tagging in photos and that kind of thing. And it feels like that's almost the beginning of, if a builder posts a video or something, the pool builder gets tagged, the landscaper gets tagged, the designer gets tagged, and it kind of feels like there's a bit more connection there. But I guess that's probably public facing.
Yep.
You still think there's room for improvement early in the stage, like at consultative stage?
Always. I feel like there's once you've at that concept level of planning consent for a new build, I believe that's when you should be starting the conversation with the landscape designer.
Yep.
You don't necessarily have to have a landscaper at this point in time, but you definitely have to have someone that understands how to put together a landscape, what is critical, so that when you're going through when they're going through their priority phase, when it's time for VM or value management, that the landscape's not the one that gets chopped to bits.
So there might be some value management internally around, fireplaces or stuff that you just you could do that and still keep your pool.
Yeah, correct. Yep. So, rather than spending $30,000 cladding a fireplace, spend $15,000 and do that fire pit area you wanted.
Yeah.
Because you're creating another space to use. No one is going to walk in and be like, that fireplace
would have looked better with,
the fireplace looks terrible because you only put linear stone instead of random walling on it.
Yeah.
No one's going to say that.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
And they're going to go outside and be like, that's a lawn area. Or they're going to be like, there's
cool.
a fire pit over there.
Yeah.
That's cool. There's some fixed seating and there's another space to use outside. And I think more so than ever, landscapers are really encouraging the idea of rooms. It's not necessarily a fenced off area or a hedged area you walk into, but it's a space inside the yard that is different and offers a different use for the family.
Yep.
So whether or not it's a table in the middle of an orchard, or it's a fire pit area, or it's a swimming pool, or it's an outdoor kitchen. And like you said before, the outdoor kitchen, pool, and al fresco being joined together is more like the fifth room now. It's almost becoming an internal thing rather than external. But more of that. I think is adding more to people's lifestyles than necessarily spending $1 million on different flooring in their house or, curtains that retract into the ceiling or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's fair. Have you seen, I guess, a change or there would have been a change. So can you talk about the change in what people are spending on landscaping and pools compared to maybe, if what you were selling 12 years ago?
Yeah. So when I was starting to sell pools 12 years ago, the pool was $50,000.
A wicked pool was $50,000.
Yeah. Yep. Well, a normal pool, any pool, $50,000.
Because there was no such thing as a wicked pool.
Yeah.
It was just a pool as a pool.
It was a pool as a pool. Yep. If you did an infinity edge, it'd be $100,000. And it's like, wow.
And you're a baller. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, man, I sold a $100,000 pool today.
Yep.
Now that's the average in Australia is $120,000 for a pool.
Yeah,
that's Australian average. Fiberglass, concrete.
Is that
spars.
average being raised by the eastern seaboard, or are we batting is South Australia still up there?
From my point of view, definitely. And from the colleagues I have, I definitely know their prices are getting closer to those points.
Yep. Because if you're saying that's the average cost of a pool, there's a lot of shell pools going in for less than half that.
Well, the average fiberglass is like 75-80% of that now.
as in 75% of that value. So that to keep that average up, there must be some 300s floating around.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And we're seeing them in Adelaide as well. We've been lucky enough to be part of a few of them. And there always seems to be 1 or 2 a year that kind of float over that number.
Yep.
And that's becoming more popular. And I think the amount of people that use Instagram now has really driven what people are willing to spend on a pool and a landscape up quite a bit.
What would an Olympic swimming pool cost to build? Like what are they, like 25 by 50 or something?
50 by 20.
Yeah.
In
like
excess of $2 million.
That's a $2 million pool. Okay.
Yeah, in
just
base,
for some
form.
basic pool. Yeah, just jump in, swim a world record, go home, kind of thing.
Correct.
So then if you're building scaled down, it's not far from like the scales probably like they're getting it's more expensive for a smaller version, but obviously there's a lot more detail involved in I don't even know where to go. Like obviously an Olympic pool's so big that there's construction concerns, right?
Correct.
Like hydraulics, strength, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that then the inverse of that? Is that the smaller pools just have a lot more detail and
what normally happens is the smaller pools and domestic pools people will because it's theirs.
Yep.
They'll spend more money on finishes.
Yep.
So what we find with our pools that are, or any pool that is sort of over 150, 200,000, typically has to have 2 things happening. It's tech. So it's got automatic covers, automatic cleaning, automation, and, it'll make you a coffee.
Yep.
And then when we go to the next level, we go over 200,000, they've probably picked nicer tiles, better stone coping.
Yep.
They've gone to a concrete top, whatever it might be.
Spas.
Adding a spa in. I mean, not always. Spa doesn't always make that happen, but it can.
Yep.
So the most common thing we've got at the moment on the books is a pool spa Infinity Edge combo, $250,000.
Yep.
All day long.
That fucking so nuts, man. Like, and look, the reality is there's a lot of money everywhere, and the amount of people that can afford to drop $250 on a pool, is increasing all the time. But it's so much money for a swimming pool. For a lot of people that might be listening that are like, I bought a house for $250 10 years ago, and now you're buying a pool for they're not buying a pool, but they might be buying a pool for that. So like if you're obviously, if you're going to build a pool for yourself, what's your 10 checklist kind of shit that you're putting in your pool, or that it's like you got, if there's no budget on your pool and there's no size, talk to me about your dream pool, like the size, the tiles, what would you, if you were building yourself a pool, what would your go-tos be?
So currently, the pool I've designed has that is in council.
Oh, so there is okay.
Yeah, it was just pretty funny. So basically, the biggest thing for me is about pool size on block. So whether or not I think a 12 by 5, a 15 by 5, or a 9 by 4 is the right size is about proportion.
Yep.
So I'm a big believer in the pool for a play pool, which is what I'd be building, needs about 30 to 40 square meters of play. So the pool we'll build is about 10 by 4.
Play pool being one that kids can jump in, and
correct.
Adults might play volleyball and
correct. Throw a ball in.
Yep.
I mean, there's not a lot of swimming happening.
Yep.
There's probably lounging on a beach. There could be some drinks in the pool, that sort of stuff. And then a separate spa.
Yep.
And not because I need a separate spa, but a separate spa is, I like the idea, it kind of adds, it doesn't add that much cost for a delivery point of view, but it adds a lot of that kind of wow because they're not connected.
Yep.
They could be connected with pipework underground, but they look completely separate, and allows you to kind of create a grand entrance into the spa. So more like a Roman bath than just the traditional square spa we're seeing in the corner of a pool.
Yep. Tiles?
Yep.
What would your go-to tiles be?
Zari or Bazzato.
And is that a glass tile or?
Yep.
And then, obviously people hear about salt versus chlorine versus ozone. I'm not even sure what else there is now. What's the go-to? What it like?
So our standard is putting magnesium. It's pretty well become the industry standard. There is a little bit of faux pas about what magnesium is and what should be and what blends, etc. And everyone's got their opinion on it. I'm a firm believer on a blend and not a pure magnesium. Because it offers you multiple ways of sanitation.
Explain that further, because I don't understand that. So I've got a salt pool.
Yep.
That obviously has an electrolysis process that turns the salt to chlorine and what is it? CH.
pH.
Makes chlorine. What does it make? So it's sodium chloride turns it into chlorine and
So sodium chloride
Yeah.
Yeah, which is basically chlorine,
Yep.
or the gas version of chlorine.
Yep.
When we're talking about magnesium pools, they're typically a combination of magnesium chloride,
Yep.
sodium chloride.
It's a similar
potassium
process, and
chloride.
it's an electrolysis process.
Exactly the same.
Yep.
It's just a different bag's gone in the pool.
So for me, I could convert my pool from a salt pool to a magnesium pool, and you just have to get a new cell.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
So some cells, and knowing the cell you have,
Yeah.
you do not need to change your cell.
So I could just change it.
You can, over time, you can either do a bomb of transform
Yeah.
to turn it into a magnesium
Yeah.
pool.
Just do a winter bomb and just kind of.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
You basically put in 20 kilos of a powder that's
Yep.
just pure magnesium because you've already got salt in there.
Yep.
And then over time, instead of adding bags of salt, you add blends.
So what's the benefit of magnesium over salt? Like, is obviously from a chlorination standpoint, but then from a human skin standpoint.
Magnesium hydrates your skin, sodium dries it out.
Yeah, okay.
It's like when you
so you'll feel better getting out of the pool.
Correct. You don't feel like you need a wash.
Yep. Yeah, I find that might be itchy or sticky from it.
None of that.
Okay, cool. I'm sure. I mean, you might not be able to comment on the health benefits, but there's obviously different. You've chlorine on your skin.
Yeah.
We don't really know what that's.
Well, correct. I mean, look, the whole thing is magnesium's in all skin creams, or the bulk of skin creams. So having that in the pool can only be good.
Yeah. And then obviously not health advice, not financial advice, but
No.
yeah, it could be good.
It could be good.
Lighting, you'd throw lights in your pool.
Always.
Color change.
Always.
Yep. So you can have your disco parties. And...
Yeah, I want that Red Death hat.
And what color would these tiles be? The azuri? What are they called?
Azari.
Have you worked out your tile color yet?
I have an idea.
Yeah.
So I've got a greyish blend for the pool.
Yeah.
And it's possibly a bright yellow in the spa.
No shit. I guess if you're going to build,
Fuck it.
if you're going to build your own pool, then you want it to have some
bullets.
We need more translation on that. So, talk to me about awards. Obviously, you've been successful in Sparza.
Yep.
Is there a national as well?
Yep.
And you've won awards nationally?
Yep.
So tell us about what that means to you, and maybe, one of the ones that really meant a lot.
So the awards for us has been kind of the one area I'll really focus spending money on. It obviously has a side benefit.
Marketing
now.
money.
Marketing money.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Correct. Has a side benefit now with Instagram that whatever your photos you're using can go on Instagram. Instagram has definitely become the number one source of new work. But the awards is always that thing. There's basically a page in the Sparza book, and people call me based on you won heaps of awards. It's a good icebreaker. It's also but that kind of that it takes away that, can I go see what you've done? Yeah, well, there's the last X number of awards we've won, and it also it preconditions the client as well to understand what you're trying to deliver. When they're seeing awards for categories of over 120,000 or over 240,000 for just the pool, they understand not to call me for something where they want to spend 50,000.
Yep.
It kind of eliminates a lot of that. Not all of it, but a lot of that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then once you've won them, and then you start winning the nationals. I mean, one of the things I think is really important for the industry is having representation for South Australia. Standing up with some of these Eastern State guys that are truly putting up some crazy stuff, like really lovely things. They've got a bigger market space for what we're doing than we do. So here in Adelaide, we're sort of not necessarily isolated, but one of very few.
As in, like, there might be 100 pools a year built for 150 grand a year or more here, whereas in the East it might be 300 or 400.
Correct.
Yep.
That sort of idea.
Yep.
Yeah, correct. So
Per state.
Per state.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So and making sure South Australia is not forgotten, and we're tussling with the best of them. We've been lucky enough to win a couple of national awards now. It's hard. You don't win every year.
Do you see value in entering and losing?
I see value in entering and losing to... Without my elite hat on, I put a Sparza hat on. It's important to not be to not win everything. It's not a good look for the South Australian industry, and so it's important to enter and then be beaten by something worthy. And
because you take learnings from that, right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, look, if you think what you're doing is good, but you don't really know. You don't know what your competitor's doing. You might have a beer with them and have a chat about stuff you're doing, like you do with the landscaping community. Same stuff. But you don't really know. You don't walk on their sites.
Yep.
You don't know what they're putting up, and that's a time. A bit like with the MLSA awards, that you work out what's actually happening in Adelaide once those awards happen. You've got a better understanding of who's doing what and why they're doing it. And after a few drinks, there's loose lips. You get a bit more information. But yeah, so I don't see any problem with entering and losing. It's good. You can't win everything.
Are there any awards that you haven't won that you want to win? That's kind of
National Pool of the Year.
Yeah, that's the one.
Only thing I haven't got yet.
And that
I really want.
So that's no budget. That's like the National Association's best pool.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't matter what category he's in. Commercial, domestic.
Could it be your pool? Like, can it? We've spoken about this before. Having like, what do you call it? A display home pool.
Yeah. Like, I haven't ever seen a display pool win Pool of the Year
because no pool builders can afford to build them.
No one's
making enough money.
The last couple of years, the pools that have won have been in excess of. One was over 750,000. The other was like 2 million. It spanned 2 buildings. Like,
what's that again?
Yeah, so it was
the pool spanned 2 buildings.
Yeah, so it was a stainless steel pool that was built on the top floors of 2 buildings and went over the road and had windows in the base of it.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so it was 2 million for some component of that. I can't believe it was only 2 million.
A stainless steel pool.
Yeah. So you build it in. You basically, it's construction off site.
Yeah.
Built in a factory. You go to site and weld it together.
Imagine the engineering.
Yeah.
And can you see welds, or it looks clean? Like it's.
I haven't seen it up
clean.
close. All the photos I've seen look pretty impressive.
Like they're the glory shots.
All the glory shots. Yeah. I mean, putting a window in the base of it that literally hovers over a street in Melbourne, it's ridiculous. So you can look up and see who's swimming.
Yeah, and it's probably hard to compete against that. You
can't. And the other pool that won recently was, like I said, $750,000. Had a 15-meter long window in it that wrapped around 2 sides of the pool. I mean, the window on its own would have been $250,000.
Curved window.
No, it was
just
big
joint window.
Big joint on either end.
So what do you? I mean, so you need to be able to play that game. You need to be doing $750,000 pools. Like, is a $500,000 pool going to win that one year?
Possibly.
Yeah, okay. But a $150,000 pool's not going to win that.
So I got a runners up a couple of years back with one of the pools I did in Adelaide. And that was about $350 at the time.
What do you think they're looking for? Like, is it the wow factor, or like, there's obviously? Do you know the judgment categories? Like, as in, like they're going, well, you get 10 points for the quality of the build, 10 points for the design.
I'm sure there's something, but they're not that open with it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've got a good recipe because we've been pretty successful. But
so you start to know what works.
Yeah, correct. But what I find is the more information I give, the better chances I get.
As in, the preparation of your application to the awards matters, because I think like that matters in the landscape industry as well. And I think that if you don't put information in your application, then you leave it up to the judges to make assumptions. And Correct. If those assumptions are negative, that can hurt you.
Yeah, for sure. You need to have the story.
Yep.
It needs to be some form of story. It doesn't necessarily need to be a sob story, but you need a story to go along with your entry.
There'll be a brief, so they'll ask for the brief, and then whether or not you've met the brief.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So do you prepare that yourself?
Not anymore.
Yeah. So you'll contract that?
No. So we do it in-house, but I'm physically not doing as much of the hands-on work with that sort of thing anymore.
Because there's a better use of your time, or you've got someone internally that's better at it than you?
Combination of both. Yep. So I always reread and edit and adjust the copy.
Yep.
But getting the bulk of the text in is time consuming.
Yep.
And when you're putting in 25 entries, if that's what you end up doing, it takes weeks of time that is very precious.
Yeah. Well, you've only got, what do you work, 30 hours a week, 35 hours a week?
Oh, I try not to.
What's your relationship with your dad like now? Like, you've obviously been in business together, and I mean, obviously he's been your boss at one point, and you're probably technically his boss at some point. Like, what's your relationship with your dad like?
Pretty good. I mean, he's the person I'm hardest on because of the greatest amount of expectation. At the end of the day, he's still the director.
Do you think he would have been as hard on you as you would be on him, like for the same reasons? Like, he's got more expectations on you than he would on any other person in the business?
I don't think so. I think it's a bit of I believe it was a little bit more of a one-way street with that one, only because the the expectations driven off 54 years of experience. I mean, and he's second generation at that. So
so he was probably carting cement and getting bitten on the arse by puppies earlier than you were.
correct.
Yep.
Correct.
And that's back when dogs were real vicious.
Yeah.
Recently imported from other country dogs. Yeah.
Pre-shots.
Yeah.
So he had a much tougher upbringing than I did. And then and he's been in the industry so long, and I often joke he'll forget more than I will ever know. Because there's no way of what's the word? There's no substitute for sheer time in doing something.
Some stuff just takes reps.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Like he's seen all of those odd, this won't work hydraulically, or this electrical thing hasn't, and he's like, I remember that happened back in Highbury in 2010.
Yeah.
The pipe's too small.
Yeah.
But the charts say it should work. The charts are wrong.
Yeah, correct.
Yep.
And structural stuff. I mean, there's some things that you can't know unless you've done it.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of things. I've had this saying for a long time. You pay for your education. If you don't know how to do something, you're going to learn two ways. You're either going to go study or you're going to do it and lose money. So you always pay. If you do too much of the latter, works out pretty badly.
And if you do too much of the earlier, you become a professional student and you never actually go do anything.
Correct.
So did you guys ever work on, like all three generations ever work together?
No.
No, you missed that?
No. So my nonno passed away when I was really young.
Yep.
So late 80s he passed. So no, that didn't happen.
That's like, but it's kind of cool that I guess you get to, you're doing stuff that he did.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and that you've learnt from your dad, who's learnt from him.
Yeah.
Like that's like even in his absence, you've still learnt stuff that he would have taught you if he was around.
Yeah, quite
cool.
possibly. Yeah.
Do you think that you'll ever do anything else? Like, do you think you'll always run Elite, or do you think there's another thing for you at some point? I mean, obviously, you're still young from a business standpoint. I
mean, I've not closed the door mentally on that idea, but it's also something I've put any thought into.
Yeah, because you're so busy operating.
Yeah, correct. I mean, look, like I said earlier, I've had a lot of things I did before I got into construction, and I feel like my passion for things outside of this world are great enough that if I had an opportunity and it made sense and I could make sure that Elite was doing what it was doing and without me being there every day, I'd look at it for sure. But it's not just something I'm actively seeking at this point in time.
I'd go back to uni and do architecture or something.
No, I thought about it. And then went 6 years plus then becoming an architect full time. Nah, I'm good.
Yeah. You still get, because you're scratching that itch daily by designing and...
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And having influence on what's getting built in Adelaide is pretty cool.
Yeah. What advice would you give to young people that are currently working in a family business that may or may not be transitioning into being their parents' boss, or, like what do you wish you knew back then that you know now? Or what advice would you give to younger you?
Be a bit more prepared. The earlier comment of paying for education, we did plenty of that earlier. I feel like when I first joined the business, we went from being very small to being a decent player in the market in the space of 2 years. That came with a lot of education very quickly.
For you and your dad?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So we went from having no staff, or one subcontractor that worked full time, like we all used to, and having a crew of plasterers and a tiler, to having like 15 employees in a very small window of time. I'd never run a business like that before, and Rick hadn't either.
Yep.
So I feel like, and because of the place that the old boy came from, was if people don't perform, you fire them. Kind of doesn't work like that anymore. You have to manage them.
You know what's funny? It should, and it does when the economy's not booming.
Yeah.
But right now, you hug.
Yeah,
I think
correct.
you have to be kind still, but...
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And so Rick's... This was the thing that I didn't really know at the time, and my father didn't know at the time, was how to manage people.
But what was the alternative, really? Like, you go do an MBA... or go work for another company for 5 years.
Which was never going to happen.
It wasn't really...
I mean, I'd done management before in retail, so I had an idea of how to run staff. But...
Like how to do rosters and make sure they're in uniform.
And running KPIs.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
KPIs in a sales environment is easy.
But not managing like, hey, man, I'm having some issues. There's a health problem with my mum and I'm not coming in. And like,
correct.
That's shit you don't... That's reps.
Yeah, exactly right. So you don't ever have that until you've had it, and then that's the biggest learning curve, and it happens very quickly.
Yeah.
And you think you have someone you can trust that you may not be able to, and you get better at reading that. I mean, it's not perfect. We all make mistakes, and you can repeat those mistakes, and just they'll come in a different form at you.
Yeah.
This person's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. 6 months later.
Who's that? You or your dad?
No, that's still me.
Because I'm that guy to hear all the time. I'm like, no, they're good. And then I've got a couple. There's probably 3 people that are my human barometers of personality.
Yep.
And Celeste's one of them. Matt's one of them. And they're just like, I don't feel right about this person.
Yeah.
I'm like, nah, they're heaps good. Like, trust me. And they're like, And I still make... So I'm getting better at going, I'm not making this decision.
Yeah.
Like someone else, like one of these two needs to make the decision. But I guess you and I are quite similar. Like we see the good in everyone. So we're like, no. Like they just had a rough trot.
Yeah.
They needed an opportunity. Like,
correct.
And that,
Yeah, exactly right. And I suppose the big thing with us is because the industry we're in Adelaide is so small, when you're trying to pull from within the industry, you're ultimately going to offend a colleague, and it's that hard little,
Yeah, it's an interesting line. I obviously deal with a lot of landscapers, and then the pool builder, Tyler, landscaper market, I guess the trade labour can probably cross over a little bit.
Yep.
And I don't really know what like the gentleman's agreement or the gentle person's agreement is now. Like, can you advertise? And even if a friend's staff applies, we've got an ad out at the moment for a driver, and one of the suppliers we deal with, one of their staff applied, and I just said, you can't interview him. They're like, why not? I'm like, it's just that's how it is. That's how I am, right? Like we don't need to, and it's probably not fair on the person that's applied because they probably want to work for us, and it's a good opportunity for them. And the way I feel about our operation, it would be a better fit for anyone because we're so good to work for. Through my rose-colored glasses around my business, but I think what is the battle rules? Like, can you poach? Do you just advertise? Like, do you have a sense for that? Like,
I'm not a poacher.
Yeah. So you won't go door knocking and be like, hey mate, here's an offer.
We have a revolving CCAD. Our name is on it.
Yep.
I mean, if you want to work for us,
you come and apply. And so you look at it and go, well, if they've applied to work here, they're obviously either wanting to work here or they don't want to work where they are.
Correct.
I think that's probably... And the reality is there's no rules, right?
Yeah, correct.
Like, you want to go poach, but I think sometimes the poachers become the poachees.
Well, you're just going to upset people. And the problem is in this industry, it's very much a favour-based industry. I mean... There's plenty of times where I've had to call in favours, and there's times where I've been asked to favour.
Well, a lot of times,
do it wherever you can.
If someone moves for $1, they're moving for $1.10.
Yeah.
And so you might have a false sense for...
Correct. So, and this is it. Like we don't say that we're going to pay people the most in the industry. I don't think we pay the least either. But we're not attacking people's wallets to get them over. Yep. That's a very short-term game plan.
Yep. I think we're going to start to see that. The results of that in the next 12 to 18 months. I was talking to a landscaper on the way here, and he was like, I don't see, because I obviously I'm like, there's going to be trouble. Like, interest rates going up. There has, and he said, I don't see what you're seeing, man. Like, he goes, we just won, a high 6-figure job. Or no, I think it was a decent amount of money just in the last week. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's good. Like, that's good for you. It's good for me. Like, I'm sure there'll be some dirt in there somewhere, or there might be some glue or some pipe.
Yeah.
But I still see it coming. I think if business owners have gone out and paid too much to build their like strong star midfield, if the business starts to suffer, those guys you're not going to be able to afford those people.
Yeah, correct. And then you have to lay people off, which is not good for anyone either.
Which I don't think a lot of employees understand, or they don't care because they're like, well, I don't care right now. I just need to make X dollars.
Yeah, correct.
And so I'm just going to take what I can get. But I think a lot of times those directors aren't going to be there with the door open when they come knocking on the door. Going, hey, can I come back? I don't think it's going to be there.
Correct.
What are you seeing? Do you think that the market's buoyant still? Like, is it?
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it's this month is a short month with all the public holidays.
Yeah, it's stupid. How do we get rid of those?
They've got to go. They've just got to go, all of them.
Malinauskas has been helpful with a lot of things. Do you reckon he could shave a couple off?
I don't think we need Easter.
I was sure Queen's birthday was done.
Well, I guess it'll happen.
And then they fucking made a King's birthday
Kings.
one. But they just upset a whole region. Sorry, guys. The whole Commonwealth. yeah, what are you seeing? Like, you know, is it getting harder to convert? Are people being a bit more like, can we shave the lights? Can we get cheaper tiles? Or it's like, no, that's fine. Like, it was in the budget. We're going to keep doing it.
Pretty well, every job we've got contract as is going as per.
Yep.
People are still adding VAs in and increasing their spends.
Yep.
That's not changing. We're finding the entry to market for the contract is higher than it has been for a long time.
Yep.
And I don't feel like that's slowing. And as far as pick up on new work between all four departments that derive money, all of them are up.
And when you say departments that drive money, so design is a department on its own.
Yep.
And that's an income.
Yep.
Excuse me, driving department. And then the landscaping.
Yep.
Pool builds.
Yep.
And pool installations.
Yep. So plunge pools.
Yep.
And renovations. 5. Sorry.
Okay.
So all 5 are. Renovations a little quieter, but it's also something I'm not focusing on at the moment.
Yeah.
So that one's a little bit.
I imagine
quieter.
the docket average on a renovation is quite low, like compared to people can spend money on a reno.
Average 70,000.
No shit. So it's like a new pool.
Yeah, it's basically a new
just
pool
less disruptive
without the shell.
Yeah.
So all the stuff you have to do with the new pool's there.
Yeah.
So if an average pool's 120,000,
yeah,
and you're going to 8x4 at home,
you're shaving the concrete.
Well, you're fully tiling it. You're putting a coping on. You're putting new equipment. You're adding some lights, and you're probably doing the landscape around it as well.
Yeah.
So we're finding that part of the business isn't as big as it has been, but the other 4 are so far up. It's not affecting us.
Yep.
And what we'll find is as it quietens, reno will pop back up.
Yep.
And then new pool and landscape probably drop down.
Have you got the skills internally to continue to do the renos? Like you can transfer those guys. It's the same thing.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's a couple of little things that change when you're doing a renovation you don't have with the new pool, but that was our bread and butter. I mean, Elite was the side business if we rewind 17 years.
Yep.
So when my father actually put Elite Pool Constructions as a registered business name, that was a subsidiary of Adelaide Pool Renovations.
No shit.
So Adelaide Pool Renovations since 91, I think it was, 1990, 1991, somewhere there. Not long after Nornor died, there was Scaffidi and Sons. So it was my dad, his brother, and Nornor.
Yep.
So it was 3 of them. And then after Nornor passed, they split up, and there was another pool company formed out of my uncle, and Dad had his own.
Yep.
And he focused on renovations.
Was that all good? Like they just had separate companies, control your own shit.
Yeah, correct.
See you Sunday for dinner.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
And you know, it's funny what you were asking about before. I thought you were going to ask if you had someone that was younger than you going into this, what would you say? And my little cousin, and he's not little because he's taller than me, but so is everyone
along
else.
with everyone else. You got in before me, man.
What's called? He's in the exact same scenario. So he's like pretty well 10 years younger than me.
So he's the guy you would be giving advice to.
And I do.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. He's gone through the same things I was.
Yep.
He started in the business.
So they're building pools?
Yep. So their primary business is reno now, which is pretty funny because we kind of switched. And they build a few pools a year.
Yep.
And yeah, so
that's so cool for him to have you to talk to.
Yeah. So I see myself and the things he's going through is the same stuff that I remember going through.
Yep.
And we bounce off each other. He's obviously been in this industry a long time now.
How old is he?
He's 30.
Yeah. But he's been in it his whole life.
He's been doing it like pretty well his whole life.
Yeah.
Like he did an tiling apprenticeship in pools.
Yep.
And then continued working with his father.
Yep.
And yeah, so he's been doing it probably maybe close to 10 years as well.
Yep.
Yeah, just interesting. The same sort of dynamics, the same, and our fathers are both pretty similar.
Yeah, okay. Well, they were brought up by the same toughness, right?
Correct.
That's nuts. So right now, what's the biggest challenge for Elite Pools? And is the pool challenge different to the landscape challenge?
Biggest challenge for Elite Pools?
Because I've got ideas in my head around what your biggest challenges are. Obviously, I've got a better context for your business than...
I think the biggest challenge for us has been able to have enough people to do the quality of work that we're wanting to do. I'm pretty fussy.
Because you are a high-end pool builder.
Yeah.
Right? So there is an expectation, award-winning, like, you know, to say you want to win Australia in Pool of the Year, like, you're not going to do that by...
Correct.
Cutting corners.
If all I was about was making money, I would build 6x3 burners, put 100 in a year.
Yep.
They're 4 visit pools. You know what I mean?
What a sentence.
You know, like that's it. Yeah, and then you make your margins aren't quite as high, but just with sheer
But there's
volume,
no risk. There's no
the risk is gone.
Even cash flow, like deposit,
bang, bang, bang.
next money done.
Smoke them through. Dig 2 pools a week.
Yeah.
Get them in the ground. Get them sprayed.
Yeah.
I mean, just
But that brings you no joy.
no. I mean, it's like the same sort of thing. Like you could do 100 landscapes a year or 10.
Yeah.
And the guy doing 10's probably just as satisfied,
I think they're
spiritually satisfied as the guy doing 100.
It's interesting. I think they're different people. I know the guys that are doing 10 and I know the guys that are doing 100.
Yeah.
And I think that they enter into it for different reasons. And I think, I talk about art versus science a lot with irrigation versus landscaping. And obviously landscaping and pool building is quite an art. And as we've talked about, sending PVC pipe to your site is not art. That's a science, right? Anyone can do it. If you've got a ute and a PVC, you can do that, right? And I think some of the bigger, and obviously there's companies like in Melbourne, like Semken, who do fucking so much work, and they are still high end, right? They've just managed to somehow have 90 staff.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the guys, there's a lot of guys that are like, I'm not doing this for the passion of landscaping. This is a business, and I'm more focused on the, I don't know what the market would be, $10,000 to $40,000 or $10,000 to $20,000 house and land package. I think they would make more money, but that's why they're doing it. I think the guys that do 10 make less money, but are more satisfied. Well, they're probably both equally satisfied.
Yeah.
Because they have different focuses.
Correct.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, we look in, especially in the pool industry, you look at the guys that are making the bank, fiberglass.
Yeah.
It's not concrete.
Yeah.
And it's because they can knock them out.
Yeah.
150, 200 a year.
Well, and their total market size is bigger.
Correct.
Which was one of the answers I had in my head to the question was, I think one of your challenges moving forward will be the market size. Once you get these chess pieces in play of the quality of the delivery, there's only so many pools you can build a year, right? Yeah. Like if you wanted to go to a $50 million pool build business, you can't do that in South Australia, like doing what you do, right?
No, you definitely not doing that.
And so that could be one of your challenges.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, do you go into state? Do you care about it that much? Or you're like, no, we can make a good business that makes enough money for our family to be happy and still have that quality.
Correct, 100%. Yeah. So there's no real desire to be that big.
Yeah.
There's no joy in that either for me. Like I think
imagine the stress that would bring.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, you get to a point where there's you're growing to that point would be a very stressful point, a stressful time.
Yeah.
And once you're there, I think it gets a bit easier because all of a sudden you've got enough.
Well, it's critical mass, right?
Yeah. So, no, I don't think that elite wants that.
Yeah.
Plunge, on the other hand, probably doesn't mind as much. It's a very different business model, though.
So that's obviously a new business, or it's a new part of the business.
Yep.
Talk to me about how that came about and I guess why. And a little bit about that.
So pre-COVID, I started looking into these precast pools that kind of became pretty big on the scene.
To make yourself, or you were not sure?
Originally started talking to people locally about making myself.
Yep.
And after a fair bit of research, people weren't that keen,
Yep.
Especially post-COVID.
Yep.
They really weren't keen. People aren't really interested in being outside their box of what makes them money, especially in tougher times. So and then when it gets busy, they really don't want to be out of their box.
So these would be guys that were building concrete tanks or precast panels, that
correct.
kind of...
Yeah, correct. So we ended up doing a fair bit of research. There's 3 major guys out of Queensland, or there was 3 major guys out of Queensland. One everyone knows.
Yep.
The other has since closed the pool building side of things because civil became so busy.
Yeah.
And that was their bread and butter.
Yep.
So, and the people we ended up going with, which was Allcast, have been doing it for 60 years.
Yep.
Doing these precast pools. And they're
60 years.
60 years.
Yeah.
I mean, in what capacity exactly? Not what they're doing now.
No, but...
So they're producing about 500 of these pools a year.
Yeah.
Going around all the way around Australia.
And all Queensland based traditionally. So Queensland's pool market's the market.
Correct.
Yep.
I mean, Queensland has in excess of 5,000 pools a year going in, and Adelaide has 2,000. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
It's completely different over there. And so what really drove this is we're doing a commercial job at a resort in a remote location on Kangaroo Island.
Yep.
And we had to deliver 8 pools, and
Yep.
we had to do it at a price point that was competitive. And the only way of really doing that was make 5 of them precast.
Yep.
And shipping them over and getting them down from Queensland and getting onto the island, putting them in, was half the price of building it, if not more.
because you would have had to bring concrete trucks over and pump. Like, how would you?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Well, so when you're spraying on KI, there's only one plant. That
Oh,
plant's
they got a little concrete plant there. Yeah.
Correct. That's coming out of Kingscote.
Yeah.
So we're at Hanson Bay, which is like an hour and 10 out of Kingscote. It's a long way for concrete to sit. Lucky it's pretty cool over there, so it doesn't go off in the tub.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where the big cost saving is primarily about staffing.
Yeah.
So
Because
you
don't
don't
have people there for longer and.
Yeah, correct. And you got to pay people to be away, and subcontractors that go there ain't going to go. If you're building a pool in St. Peter's, they're not going to go to Kangaroo Island for that.
They don't need to, do they?
They don't need to. I'm just going to build the pool in St. Peter's.
Yeah.
So you pay overs to get the jobs done. So a bit of tax doing regional jobs, but I think it's worked out really well. That's coming to a head over the next 6 to 12 months, and after looking into that for a long time about how they worked and what they could do and what they cost and what the constraints were, I was like, you know what, there's a business here.
Yep.
It's not represented well in South Australia, and I've got a pretty good branding that we're using with Elite. And I thought I could use that knowledge and our current network of consultants to start that business.
Yep.
We did a cold launch last year, so it's 12 months in now, and it's doing okay. We've had a bit of an uptake over the last 3 months since we finished the first few local ones, has really helped.
Because people can see that it's achievable and that you've done
Correct.
it, and yeah,
correct. And also that whole idea of we don't want to go too big too fast. The last thing you want to do is have 20 contracts for these pools and then work out every single one has a problem doing something.
Yep.
That education would be very expensive.
Can you enter those into the pool awards?
Of course.
Yep. So it is a pool. It's a pool. It's fine.
100%.
Yep.
Prefabricated pool. Shipping
Is that
container,
a category?
Yeah.
Yep.
Shipping container, concrete, stainless steel, whatever
Yep.
it might be. As long as it's prefabricated, it's got its own category.
No shit. Those shipping container pools, I was almost like I half thought about putting one of them down like the side of my house because I liked the look of it. I thought it was cool because I had the sloping block. I thought I could just cut it in. What? That's just. Is there just one? Is that the one company that does that? Or?
As far as I'm aware, my only thing with the shipping container pool is they're reliant on shipping containers, which have become a commodity.
Yeah.
So I reckon they went from being really good and a smart idea, and it would have been when they started that business.
Well, they were almost not that they were disposable, but like I know we've got 40 footers that I paid 2.2 for, and we just had 40 footers delivered for 4.4, and that's inside 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, that's not a massive portion of the total pool cost.
No.
But shipping containers were, for that 2 years, no one
You
was
couldn't get
giving-
your hands
no
on
way,
it. So
man.
how'd that business work?
Yeah.
And that I'm not sure how that's happened.
Well, I mean, I guess they just put their prices up or, you know. But
Whereas
yeah.
concrete, it's available.
Yep.
Good or bad.
Yep. What's the, do you have a favourite job that you've done?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, Gawler.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes into the first design I was paid to do.
Yep.
It's the original design I did is
Yep.
what got built. It's
Yep.
unheard of. It's not happened since.
Yep.
There's always a change.
Yep.
As
in they installed the pool exactly how you designed it.
Every single component of the landscape
They
was
didn't touch
installed
it.
exactly how I designed it.
Yeah.
I did not redraw it.
Yeah.
Which, like no one gives design one and a price. I mean, back then that was a pretty expensive job.
Yeah.
I mean, today it'd be a lot more expensive, but
Yep.
that was probably one of the biggest jobs it was definitely the biggest contract. Wasn't the biggest job financially. We've had contracts that got bigger than this one, but definitely the biggest job we went straight to contract with.
Yeah, like if you add all the components together, it was the biggest kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously now there's a lot more.
Well, now it's the number now is actually really reasonable compared to some of the numbers that are getting thrown around the place.
Yeah, do they know that? Because you've got a relationship with the client.
Well, I saw them last week. We were lucky enough to film an episode of Australia's Best Pools there.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, which was cool. And I was asked the question about cost, and had to give an answer that was not that I didn't lie about it. I just didn't give a number.
Yeah.
He said, "Look, I think it'd probably be worth about this," and so you're not far off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to gauge exactly what it would have cost today, but
Yeah.
yeah.
How do you find the clients when you say, "Oh, we're going to get either an award"? So for the awards, they judge them by photo. They don't go to the site. Yep.
Correct.
But if you're going to go film at a site like that, do your clients? I mean, obviously everyone's different, but do they get excited about it? They're like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!
Yeah,
Like, my backyard's going to be on TV," or like, is it?
Yeah, I mean, look, some clients. I mean, the Gawler clients were not only an amazing pool, an amazing client, amazing client. And I've seen them out, and I've had, randomly at wineries.
Yeah, and you'll stop and spend time with them.
Spend time, have a chat with them. They've been great. I mean, they were great during the construction process, great during the design process, been great since. I mean, we finished that pool 4 years ago.
Did you enter the landscape into the landscape awards?
Yes.
Yep.
And I got a runners up.
Yep. Oh, well, that's what you get for being a pool builder trying to be a landscaper.
Yeah, exactly right. Should
have known better.
No, I definitely lost to something that was unbelievable.
Yeah. And did you enter the pool? Into the pool awards?
It did.
Yeah.
That got the national lap pool of the year.
No shit.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what's the boundaries of a lap pool? Like 4 meters, 3 meters?
It's about percentage of width versus length.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. So if you've got I don't know the exact numbers, but like if you've got a 9 meter pool, it can't be more than say 2 and a bit meters wide.
Yeah, so it's like 10%. No, not 5.
Yeah, there's like...
What's that, 20%? Yeah.
Yeah, there was some sort of width versus length.
Yeah.
So that one's 18 by 3.
Okay, yeah, so it must be 20%. Yeah.
It's something. There's a number that it has to go.
Anyway, yeah, we don't need to probably drill into it too much. Do you like if either of the kids come to you and said, I want to take over the business sometime, what does that look like for you? Like, are you supportive of that?
Yeah, 100%. Man. They will. Both of my children are very like all kids. They're both very unique. They both got their strengths and weaknesses.
Yep. They're also both very young still, aren't they?
100%.
Yeah.
And I don't see either of them doing it, but I didn't see me doing it, so who knows?
Would you encourage them to go find other jobs first, even if it's in their teens? Like I think about it with Jack. Like, if he goes, if he's, I don't know, 15 and he could start stocking shelves at Waterpro, I'd rather he go work at McDonald's or Woolworths or Coles or whatever.
I definitely will encourage them to have a life outside of a family business before getting into it, because it's all consuming. Like, I know when I first started doing it, your result isn't just your employee, it's your uncle, or it's your father, or it's your mother, or it's your sister-in-law, or it's your wife.
Which is those terms you just used are real. Like, they are all the people that work with you, right?
Yeah. So right now, there's no uncles, but definitely a wife, a sister-in-law, and a father and a mother.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and I've had cousins working for me, but it's always your actions, especially as being the manager, or what's the word? What's my current title?
The leader.
Currently is business development. I'd like to call myself.
You're the BD.
BDM, management.
So you'd be like business development director.
Yeah, whatever hat needs to be worn, I get. But you at the end of the day, my decisions affect multiple incomes and multiple households, and I know these households. Yeah. So I've got to look at my brother-in-law and the eye. If I make a mistake, that's detrimental to the business.
Yeah.
You always got to be, you're always thinking about that. Not that you're going to, but you're always thinking about
what. Do you think that you'll always put family first in those decisions? Like, how do you, like, if you're put, and I guess it might be situational, but, you kind of see, I'm very cynical about partnerships, and I have been forever, because my only partnership didn't work. But then I've also got a marriage, which is amazing. So I do have a partnership that does work, but I just don't look at them as the same thing, because one was business and I guess one's pleasure. But I feel like it's business the way we run our household. But do you think about, like, the partner, like, we took some clients out on the weekend to the golf who are brothers, and they run a business together, and they're just like, it just works, like, we're brothers, like, it's and I'm like, yeah, but I don't know, like, I still think that there'd be moments where you're just like, fuck, like, but you just have to move past that, like.
Yeah, so you do, you definitely do. You have to, when it comes to the business, there's always got to be a decision that like
someone makes the last call.
Yeah, and so we had to make a call on that years ago about who made that last call.
Yep.
And my father and I had a discussion. The last call was made by me.
Yep.
And that's something I've been doing for the last 5 years.
Do you think would he generally be in agreement, like 80% of the time on your calls, or?
The calls that I'm making are generally to do with performance and aesthetic.
Yep.
That I'm having to step in and be like, look, I'm not happy with that as a result because of this, or I'm not happy with production because of this.
Yep.
And then, there's a lot of things, especially with a business model like ours, where you're not in control of your destiny 100%. You know, weather, obviously, that's everyone.
Yep.
But you're relying on some subcontractors.
Weather probably smashes pools more than anything.
Yeah, weather is terrible for pools.
Yeah.
Last winter was an absolute show.
Like, at least with landscaping, like, they'll be doing stuff when it's drizzling.
Yeah. I know we can still do stuff. It just, the problem is, especially before concrete,
Yep.
cave-ins.
Yep.
It's a horrid word, and
Yep.
it happens too often.
Yep.
So
you don't want to dig and leave for too long.
No.
You want to dig and shell.
Yeah, but you can dig and collapse the next day.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but yeah.
That's fucked.
Yeah, so that's normally when I'm talking about when I'm making these decisions, it's about that sort of stuff.
Yep.
You know, equipment, they're easy things to be making decisions on. Who to hire, who not to hire, who to let go. Those decisions, he trusts me. He doesn't question anything.
Yep.
In fact, any decision I make, he accepts in one way or another.
Yeah. We've spoken a lot about your dad. What's your relationship like with your mum when it comes to business? Like, does she kind of like go, that's right, there's two of you taking care of shit, I don't need to get involved?
No, so mum's director by name.
Yep.
That's it.
She doesn't want anything to do with it?
No, hasn't been there for like 4 or 5 years now.
But was active in the business at one point?
Yeah, so originally when the business was starting, mum did like pays and accounts. And then as the business got bigger, I had to get someone with experience, which happened to be my sister-in-law.
Yep.
She was in a position looking for she could take a voluntary redundancy where she was, and she had worked for a mining company for a decade, doing exactly what I have her doing now. Perfect. Absolute perfect.
Do you think your parents would have ever imagined the business to be what it is today? Like, did they have kind of like desires to do what you've done? Yeah,
100%. So when I joined the business, my father definitely put down the gauntlet of what he wanted. And his ambition, whether you can tell or not now, was pretty big. Like, I look back and I remember the conversations of, I want you to speak to these architects. I want to do this work.
But he didn't want to go have the conversation.
But he didn't have the ability to have the conversation. Like, you spend 5 minutes in a room with my old man and you can see where I get a lot of what I have from.
Yep.
But he doesn't have that with new people.
Yep.
Like, he has it after a few drinks, whereas I can do it sober.
You build rapport quick.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I was able to, not necessarily, I didn't do door knocking. We just sort of, proof was in the pudding. We did some jobs, we did them well.
Yep.
And we got calls. And then architects started calling us.
But then
directly.
how you handle those leads also matters. It doesn't have to be cold call. It can still be a warm lead, but you still need to handle that lead.
Yeah, correct. It's about what I could offer that no one else to this day, from my understanding, offers is punctuality and information in a timely and accurate fashion.
Yep.
I mean, it seems like a hilarious thing to say is what our key things are, but that's what it's been. It's been built on that.
So that would be your key points of difference, obviously quality and, you know, everything everyone else says they do.
Yeah, correct.
But that's the...
But when we go build a project, the information we're giving to the other parties involved is superior.
Yep.
Early.
Is that just your opinion, or are you getting that as feedback? Like,
we wouldn't be doing the quantity and
at the quality.
And no. Quantity at what's the word?
Like
as regularly without doing that.
Yep.
I mean, so it's not that I ask, but a lot of the people we've worked for years. Yep. And they've had other pool builders and they've had other landscapers and they know what else is out there. I have one home builder that does some really lovely things, and I'm his longest serving pool builder. He's had 3. He had 3 before we started with him, and we've been doing it now for about 7-8 years. Because
they have a duty of whatever to look around.
Well, it starts with that. It gets to a point where there's key traits on site, and I'd like to think that the pool is a pretty specialist item.
Yep.
It's like people with cabinets. They don't shop around. If they've got a good cabinet maker, they know they're a good cabinet maker, they'll go to that cabinet maker.
Yep.
If they're 10-15% dearer than everybody else, care.
Yep.
Service, punctuality, don't give me headaches, fix their problems.
Yep.
All those things. And what's it look like in 2 years when everything's said and done, and I got a call from a client at 10 because there's a leak in my pool?
Yep.
Or there's a pump not working, or whatever it may be, elite offer that service for the whole time.
Yep.
Like, it's not just in the lead in, it's not up to the sale, it's during the construction, and it's once the construction's finished. And I think that's our biggest point of difference. We continue the same level of service throughout.
Yep.
And a lot of people we've built pools for, we've built more than one.
Yeah, they'll just call you.
Correct.
Yep. They don't get two prices. And if they do get two prices, it's just to make sure you're not being ridiculous.
Yeah, correct.
Yep. So what's the plan for Plunge? Obviously, I know you better than a lot of the guests that we have on, but I feel like Elite's kind of not at the biggest it's ever going to be, but it's doing some pretty substantial volumes in its market.
Mm-hmm.
What's the plan for Plunge? Like, that's obviously gives you an ability to move into other markets.
Yeah, I mean, part of the idea with Plunge was how do I offer the elite experience without the price?
Yep.
And you can do that. The pool is nowhere near the market average. It's less than half the market average in price. In some cases, a third of the market average. It's still a concrete pool, so it still fits,
What you believe in.
What I believe in.
In your blood.
Fiberglass, it's a tub.
Yeah.
I mean, you step in it, you hear dunks.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Come on. So...
Shout out to all the fiberglass pool builders out
sorry,
there.
guys. I love you. But it's just not me.
It's different.
And it doesn't fit the company.
Yep.
So, and there's only so many people in Adelaide that can do what we do as far as subbies and employment.
Yeah.
So the only way to expand is deliver something that has low impact from a staffing requirement, but I can still deliver cool things.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't have to be cookie cutter, and of course that will happen, but you can do really bespoke one-off projects. And some of the stuff we're seeing now come through from designers, they get really creative. I mean...
As in, because you still tile it on site?
No.
It comes over tiled.
So
you just order your tile. It's all done.
It's all done.
You got to make sure that you install it properly.
Correct. And it's 3 to 5 days on site for the install process.
Yep.
So it's quick.
So your time from start to finish, which is cash flow, it's good for the business.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. And the longest time is the council. That's the biggest... hindrance when it comes to Plunge is you've got to wait for council like you do with every pool.
Do you feel like councils the council's processes have changed in the last 10 years? Do you think it's easier or harder to get a pool through than it was 10 years ago?
10 years ago, I could get, or even 3 years ago. So before March 2020, which was also COVID, but before that, there was no Plan SA portal. Yep. So every council you would submit in directly to. And you could have pools that met what was called Schedule 1A, which means they didn't need planning consent.
Yep. Because of the size, the footprint, the whatever.
Yeah,
yep.
As long as it was a certain distance away from the house, the equipment was a certain distance away, and blah, 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 blah. You've certain list of things, as long as it wasn't heritage, fire area, you could get it through. And you wouldn't have to wait for the council process, which is 4 to 8 weeks for the planning side.
Yep.
We've had one recently where they took 4 weeks to start the process, and then they've got 4 weeks from there.
Yeah.
So, which is 8 weeks on a lead time just for them to say, yeah, I think of the idea of you building it without building consent.
Looking at it through their lens, do you think there's any positives in that? Like, not the delay, but the complexities.
I like the fact there's one portal to enter through, because it does make you. When I was doing the applications before I had people in there doing these applications on our behalf internally, I would have to ring all the councils. And I'd develop a relationship with planning officers and know them by their name.
Build rapport.
And I'd be like, oi, Jenny, come on. Like, I need this through. Yeah. I've got to dig this thing in a couple of weeks. Leave it with me. Yeah. All right? Now, it doesn't exist.
It's like dealing with a bank now.
Yeah, it's exactly like dealing with a bank now.
Didn't get approved. Why? Can't tell you. Can I talk to someone? Nah. See ya.
Nah, correct.
Yeah.
So that's the part I don't like. I like the central.
But I'm assuming it obviously means that the cowboys or cowgirls can't get in there and start slapping cheap pools in, right? And taking shortcuts.
Correct. I mean, look, you could...
It's safer, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, there's more checks and that happen now, and they require more out of your drawings than you used to submit in the past, which is good and bad.
Yep.
But you definitely have... if you needed something through quickly... You can be like, let's get this through and then sort this out later. It doesn't quite happen anymore.
Yep. The pool fencing regulations, have they been... I mean, it's something that comes up a lot in the landscaping conversation, because obviously the landscaping and the pool fencing kind of become a bridge. Has that changed much, or it's always been pretty strict? Around proximity to fencing?
No. So it's gotten... the fencing code is being updated every couple of years.
Is that a national code or a state code? Yeah, okay.
National code.
Which is good. At least there's that.
Yeah, so there's national codes, and then some states have their own little on top.
Yep.
Here you go.
Yep.
SA doesn't have that. We've just got the national code, which is relatively strict. It's definitely harder now than it was a decade ago to do a fence around a pool, and there's There's different rules for different fence types
Yep.
and different intersecting fences.
Yep.
It's a pretty
Because we're seeing intersecting fences more. Like designers are obviously getting a bit creative.
correct.
It's not just a glass pull or a tubular.
Yeah, so if you do a fence that's more than 50 mil wide, it has a different code once it intersects the boundary fence.
Yep.
So, not a different code, but a different section in the code that you have to comply with.
The obviously being an architect was on the cards. If you weren't a pool builder and didn't go down the architecture path, and you could do any job, and you had the skills to do it, and you could just switch out right now, and I'm talking like racing car driver, pilot, tour guide, scuba diving instructor, like what would you do if you could just pick anything and just got the skills, got the job? I've got an idea for you, but
Have you? Throw it at me. I can't even.
you mean if you could probably
There's too many
you could
things.
probably drop 30 kilos and become an F1 driver.
Yeah, I could do that. I was even thinking like it's weird. I didn't default. My biggest passion outside of what I do is the Chelsea Football Club. Like
Yep.
ridiculous, and we're terrible at the moment. And the first thing that came to my head was manager at Chelsea, not
Yeah.
even player.
Yeah.
Like the club manager.
I think
would
being
be,
the manager there, you'd have more longevity.
Yeah,
You could probably
yeah.
do that for a decade.
You could do it for longer.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be a manager in a pro club for a long time. A player.
Well, you've got
is
the skills, obviously,
10,
with the
15.
genie's giving you that.
Yeah. So like, I like the.
That'd be cool. And then you get to meet all the players. You get to have
I mean, yeah.
mentoring the players.
Next Jose Mourinho, the
I don't
special
know what that
one.
means.
Oh yeah, he's
Yeah.
classic.
Yeah. Remember.
You need the translator back in here.
Google Translator. All right, man. Oh, I've got no more questions for you. We need to probably go have some dinner. Well, it's 4:20, so maybe go have some beers. Thank you so much for making the time. I've been at Anthony for this for a couple of years. And he's finally cracked. So what this does mean is that Ryan Elmy will be next.
Oi.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Anthony's done it now, so
Ryan, you better do it,
he has
man.
to do it now. So we'll
Can't
let him
help
know.
me.
If anyone wants to get in touch with you, obviously your Instagram is Powerhouse website.
Yep.
Is it Elite Dash Pools?
No.
It's Elite Pools.
Elite Pools and Landscapes.
Yep.
At
So
Elite Pools and Landscapes.
yeah, but on the website.
Yep.
Yep. Cool. So I'll get our good friend Dylan here to link all that up underneath on all platforms. Thank you very much again. We'll go have a drink, and yeah, if you need a pool craned or blown, here's your guy.
Yeah, I'm dying for a piss.
Yeah, go. I'll do the intro. Just close the door and then, well, yeah. The toilets will be obvious. It's the one with the little skirt on it, just here. What number is 67? He did go into the girls' toilet. Oh, no.
Is that a little scream?
That was Amelia.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got that, because we can put that at the end of the podcast.
We can.
Yep, stitch that on at the back.
60 seconds.